They say a first date can change your life. For Shade Robinson, it ended hers. She dressed up with hope that evening, not knowing she was stepping into the final chapter of her story. No one warns you that love can look like a smile masking a predator, that charm can be a costume, that sometimes evil doesn't knock, it invites you out. Shade Carleena Robinson was only 19, a warm-hearted, glowing young woman raised between two homes, two parents who loved her in a world that failed to protect her. She was born on May 10, 2004, in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and later moved to Milwaukee, where her childhood blossomed quietly. Even when hearing issues slowed her speech, she never stopped pushing forward. Shade had a quiet kind of strength, the kind you only notice after it's gone. She was the girl who loved Dora, Bratz dolls, Hello Kitty, and Winnie the Pooh, symbols of a gentle world she grew up believing in. But the world she stepped into as a young woman was anything but gentle. The man she met for that date wasn't just a stranger. He was the answer to a question every woman fears. What if this is the night I don't come home? What unfolded next is not just tragic, it's terrifying. A descent into betrayal, control, and horror that no one saw coming, except maybe Shade herself in those last fleeting moments. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. And by the end of this episode, you'll be asking yourself the same haunting question. How well can you ever really know someone? Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to True Crimes Ratels. This story deserves to be heard, and your voice matters. Drop a comment below. Do you think we ignore red flags in the name of love? Or are some predators simply too good at hiding? Now, let's go back to the day Shade Robinson stepped out, looking for love, and met her end instead. Shade wasn't just another pretty face. She was the kind of person who made rooms feel brighter the moment she walked in, not because she demanded attention, but because her energy just filled the space. Her childhood friend, Kara Quinnell, said it best. She was the most beautiful girl in the world, and she didn't just mean on the outside. Shade's laugh was the kind that made other people start laughing too, even if they didn't know what the joke was. She was confident, not in a loud or arrogant way, but in that rare, quiet way that draws people to you. She was magnetic, a light in other people's darkness. She started school at Craig Montessori in Milwaukee, living with her mom and grandparents. Eventually, the family moved to the east side of the city, where she settled into a new rhythm alongside her mother, her younger sister, and a stepfather. Summers were special. She'd pack her bags and fly south to Florida to be with her dad. Her life stretched across 2 homes, 2 states, but somehow she held both worlds together. Shade kept herself busy. She wasn't the kind to sit still for long. Girl Scouts, soccer, dance. She joined Mad Hot Ballroom and tapped her feet moving across school gym floors and community center stages. She moved with grace, with joy, with purpose. In 7th grade, her life shifted again, this time full-time to Florida, where she moved in with her father. There, she picked up new hobbies, crocheting, caring for pet birds, and tending to a few fish. They were her only pets, but she cared for them like they were family. She even got her first job at 14, working at a car wash. That's who Shade was, determined, disciplined, and always looking ahead. But behind the smile, something wasn't right. Midway through her sophomore year, her mother began to notice troubling signs. Shade's mental health was declining. There were signs of emotional distress, moments where her mother feared she might hurt herself. It wasn't just teenage rebellion. It was something deeper, and the home she was living in with her father had become unstable. So her mother stepped in. She brought Shade back to Milwaukee, not just to protect her, but to try and give her a fresh start. Shade was 15 when she re-enrolled at Riverside High School. She didn't waste time. She picked up another job at Pizza Shuttle and threw herself into her work and studies. She wasn't the type to complain or show off. She just got things done. And in December 2021, she did something most teenagers only dream of. She graduated early, a full semester ahead of her peers. But Shade wasn't done. She enrolled at Milwaukee Area Technical College to pursue a degree in criminal justice. She earned a full promise scholarship right out of high school, and she wasn't about to waste it. She was already saving not just for rent or tuition, but for life itself. She wanted freedom, growth, control over her future. She traveled when she could, and soon she made one of her proudest purchases her first car, a Honda Civic she named Coco Chanel. Not for the designer, but in memory of her godmother's dog who had passed away. That car symbolized more than just independence. It was a piece of her identity. Shade loved it. Her younger sister, Adriana Reams, remembered how they used to bicker like most siblings do. But as they got older, that friction turned into something stronger, a bond, a friendship. Shade looked out for her. No matter how many double shifts she pulled, she came home, cooked, checked in, and made sure everyone else was okay. Her mother remembered her as a force of love, someone who made life easier just by being there, someone who could carry the weight of the world on her back and still make others laugh through it all. At Pizza Shuttle on Milwaukee's east side, Shade was known for her energy. Her manager, Justin Romano, said it plainly. She talked to everyone. She had that warmth that made people feel welcome, even in a crowded, chaotic kitchen. Her coworkers saw it too. They described her as kind, funny, smart, and dependable. A bright soul in a tiring job. But Shade wasn't planning to stay in fast food forever. She had dreams, big ones. Her mother said she had started talking about joining the U.S. Air Force. She wanted to fly. She wanted to serve. She wanted more than just a paycheck. She wanted purpose. Still, life wasn't always kind. When Shade turned 19, tension inside the home began to grow. The once tight bond between her and her mother began to fray. Arguments escalated. Walls went up, and eventually there was no more room to fix what was broken. Shade left home. She bounced around for a while, trying to find a place where she could breathe. Eventually, she landed in a riverfront apartment in Brewers Hill, a quiet spot with a view, a temporary peace. She also picked up a bartending job. She was figuring it out, piece by piece, alone but determined. As she entered adulthood, the world began to notice her. Men in particular. She was stunning, magnetic. But love hadn't been kind to Shade either. She'd been cheated on, lied to, and somewhere along the line, her trust began to erode. She started to close herself off, protecting herself from more pain, from more betrayal. But she wasn't made of stone. Eventually, she let someone in. His name was Maxwell Anderson. Maxwell was 33, 14 years older than Shade. He grew up in Waukesha County, just outside Milwaukee, graduated from Milwaukee High School in 2009. On the surface, he was unremarkable. Just another quiet suburban kid who grew into an adult with a mortgage and a decent job. He owned a modest red brick duplex on South 37th Street, just off West Oklahoma Avenue. 2 stories, a quiet street, nothing flashy, nothing that would raise alarms. But behind those closed doors was a darkness no one saw coming. And Shade was about to walk right into it. To the party crowd in Milwaukee's downtown bar scene, Maxwell Anderson was a familiar face, the kind you'd see smiling behind the bar or standing near the velvet ropes, letting people into a night they'd barely remember. He worked at places like Victor's, once one of the city's most popular clubs, and also bounced between the Rave and Eagles ballroom pouring drinks, checking IDs, keeping peace with a grin. People knew his name. He was friendly, loud, charismatic in that way people who thrive in nightlife tend to be. But that was only one version of Maxwell. At home behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. Neighbors didn't describe the same man. To them, he was quiet, withdrawn. He didn't talk much. He walked his dog sometimes. He moved around a lot from Economawalk to Sister Bay, and even spent time in Boulder, Colorado. He lived like someone trying to escape a shadow that always caught up to him. And that shadow? It had a name, his record. Maxwell's criminal history didn't start in some distant past. It began just a decade ago in 2014. That year, he was visiting a family in Delafield when something went very, very wrong. A relative found him agitated, sweating, unresponsive. When questioned, he exploded shouting, throwing objects, locking someone in a room to stop them from calling for help. When police arrived, He stole that same relative's car and crashed it into a patio. The charges? 2 counts of disorderly conduct. He pled guilty, paid a $416 fine, but the cracks were already showing. That same year in Waukesha County, he was charged with drunk driving. Another guilty plea, his license suspended, a $350 fine, a year of probation, no jail time. Just paperwork and warnings, but no one was really watching. Then in 2015, the darkness deepened. He was living in a basement apartment in Egg Harbor with family who had taken him in. But something in Maxwell refused stability. He didn't follow rules, disappeared for days, left messes behind. He grew detached, cold. One of his relatives, out of concern, gently suggested he seek mental health help. Maxwell didn't take it gently. He snapped. He smashed both their phones so they couldn't call for help. There was no landline, no way to reach outside. One of the relatives had to run, barefoot and panicked, to a neighbor's house to get the police. The damages in that incident totaled over $1,300. Maxwell was charged with 4 misdemeanors and later pled guilty to 3: criminal damage to property, intimidating a witness, and disorderly conduct with a domestic violence modifier. Again, he got probation. Then came 2019. Now, back in Milwaukee, he found himself on the 2300 block of West Wisconsin Avenue, involved in an argument with a woman. It turned physical. A bystander stepped in, and Maxwell turned his rage on him instead. He beat the man viciously, caught on video, fists flying until police pulled him off. He pled guilty again, paid $7,000 in restitution. Another year of probation. Nothing changed. By 2020, he had purchased a small brick duplex on Milwaukee's south side. But just 2 years later, in January 2022, he was pulled over once again. Speeding 70 in a 30. Blew past a red light, told officers he had been drinking. The breathalyzer confirmed it. His blood alcohol level was well over the legal limit. And still, that wasn't the end. Later that year, he was cited for driving again, this time with a suspended license. And at a court hearing, his probation officer reported that Maxwell had tested positive for cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol, used all clear violations of his release terms. A judge ordered him to remain completely sober. But it didn't matter. Because in March of 2023, Maxwell was discharged from probation despite all the red flags, the violations, the broken promises. And a year later, he went on a date with Shade Robinson. It was April 1st, 2024. Shade was glowing with excitement. She told a staff member at her apartment that she had a date. Her eyes were bright, her outfit simple but cute. Ripped jeans, a white top. It was a fresh start, maybe a chance at something real. At 4:15 p.m., she left for work, texting Maxwell she was in the mood for seafood. He suggested they meet at the Twisted Fisherman, a seafood spot on Canal Street. It was familiar. Maxwell had once worked there. He even mentioned that he needed to grab a W-2 form from the bar. They ordered food, chatted, drank. Shay, just 19, was never carded. No one even asked for her ID. To the bartender, it was just another night. Maxwell leaned in and told a former coworker, "This is our first date." An hour later, they left and headed to a second location, Duke's on Water, a downtown Milwaukee bar. There, Shade sent a Snapchat selfie to a friend smiling, unaware of what was to come. She was served drinks again. No ID, no questions. By 9 p.m., they left Duke's and drove back to Maxwell's duplex. And then, everything changed. What happens next is pieced together through evidence, surveillance footage, and the haunting words of a confidential informant, someone who had once been inside Maxwell's home and later came forward. That night, Maxwell queued up a bizarre episode of Love, Death, Robots on Netflix, The Drowned Giant. It's about the naked corpse of a giant that washes ashore, slowly dissected and scattered throughout a town. The imagery was chillingly symbolic. And while the episode played, Maxwell began taking pictures of Shade face down on his couch, vulnerable, exposed. Some of the images were disturbing, showing her in various stages of undress and being touched by Maxwell. According to the informant, this had all been planned. They described Maxwell's basement as something straight out of a horror movie. One room was entirely wrapped in plastic, floor to ceiling. There was a sanitation sink, 3 saws, a bondage sling, handcuffs, restraints. Even the small windows were sealed with plastic sheeting, blocking out any sound or sight from outside. It was a room designed to trap, to silence, to erase. Investigators believe Maxwell pulled a gun on Shade to force her into the basement. There, sometime during the night, she was murdered, dismembered, her body cut apart with a saw or knife, and what remained was scattered. No one knows why. No one has ever heard Maxwell speak a word of remorse. But what's clear to police, to prosecutors, to everyone who saw the evidence is that this was not an accident. This was premeditated, cold, calculated. At 1 a.m., Maxwell casually walked out his front door holding what was left of Shade in her own car, the Honda Civic she'd named Coco Chanel. In downtown Milwaukee was still empty. He moved through it like a man on a grocery run. No urgency, no panic. He drove north, passing her apartment, and reached Pleasant Valley Park near the Milwaukee River. Around 2 a.m., he left that area and headed south toward Cuddy. He rammed through a gate near a pump house, leaving behind part of the car. He dumped what police would later identify as a foot and other human tissue. Then 45 minutes later, he drove to Warnament Park, a stretch of bluff facing Lake Michigan. There, partway down a steep, wooded slope, he left her leg, like she was trash. At 7:29 a.m., surveillance footage showed Maxwell again on the 1800 block of North 29th Street, climbing out of Shade's Honda. He was wearing a gray hoodie and carrying a tan backpack. He lit a fire. By the time the Milwaukee Fire Department arrived, the car was engulfed. It was unrecognizable. But what they found inside made everything real. Shade's clothes, the same ones from the night before, charred and ripped. Her puffer jacket, her white shoes, the remains of her phone, all broken, melted, buried beneath ash. At 8:43 a.m., Maxwell was spotted again stepping off a city bus, still wearing that hoodie, still carrying that backpack, alone, walking calmly back to his house. But he wasn't done. Later that day, Maxwell texted Shade's phone as if she were alive, trying to craft a digital illusion to buy himself time. But it was already too late. Because that evening, a human leg was found. Just off the steep bluff near Warnament Park, it had been resting there in silence alone, exposed right where Maxwell had left it. At the time, no one knew whose it was. But deep down, many feared the truth. By April 2nd, the silence was ringing. Shade hadn't shown up for work. She never missed a shift. Her manager at Pizza Shuttle was the first to notice. Then her coworkers, then her friends. No calls, no texts, no replies. By 9 p.m., a coworker reported her missing. On April 3rd, police visited her apartment. Staff told them she was last seen April 1st heading out for her date. Friends showed the police the Snapchat image from Dukes on Water. She had been smiling. Hours later, she was silent. Then a friend came forward. She had used the Life 360 app to track Shade's phone. The final ping? Warnament Park, at 4:30 a.m. April 2nd. It matched perfectly with where the remains were found. By April 4th, the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office was already investigating the discovery of the leg. That afternoon, they located Maxwell. According to Detective John Guillot, he was sitting in the driver's seat when they approached, shaking, visibly rattled. The guilt was written all over him. Inside his car? That same gray hoodie from the surveillance footage, the one worn by the man walking away from Shade's burning car. The pieces were falling into place. But justice was only just beginning. The mask was finally slipping. Days after Shade Robinson vanished, police obtained a search warrant and moved in on the man she had trusted with her time, and, unknowingly, her life. The home on South 39th Street looked ordinary from the outside. A simple brick duplex, quiet street, nothing unusual. But what investigators found inside would send a chill through even the most seasoned officers. Inside one of the bedroom's bloodstains. Traces smeared along the walls, trailing down to the basement like breadcrumbs to something unthinkable. The trail led to a room, not just any room, but a converted dungeon. a space outfitted with BDSM restraints, chains, and hardware, and more blood. Investigators held their breath, fearing the worst. But tests later confirmed that blood wasn't Shade's. Still, something was very wrong here. 2 days later, as the search expanded into Milwaukee's surrounding neighborhoods, the nightmare deepened. Near North 31st Street in West Galena, close to where Shade's burned-out car had already been found, officers made a horrifying discovery: a human foot. It matched a severed leg recovered days earlier from the shores of Warnament Park. That leg had washed up on April 2nd, just 1 day after Shade disappeared. And it wasn't the last. Her body was surfacing piece by piece, a slow and savage unraveling of a young life that had only just begun. On April 9th, Maxwell Anderson made his first court appearance. No formal charges yet pending DNA confirmation, but he wasn't going anywhere. Authorities held him for 72 more hours. That same day, in a moment that no parent should ever experience, Shade's own family took matters into their hands. They searched Warnament Park themselves and found what no family should ever have to find: another dismembered piece of their daughter, a bone. It was now beyond undeniable. Something horrific had happened to Shade, and it was clear whoever had done this hadn't just killed her. They tried to erase her. On April 12th, Anderson was formally charged with first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and arson. But the horror didn't stop there. Less than a week later, along the shoreline of Lake Michigan, a passerby stumbled upon more remains this time: a torso and an arm. Testing confirmed they were Shade's. Then nearly a month later, another arm washed ashore, this time at Waukegan Municipal Beach, across state lines in Illinois. It too belonged to Shade. By mid-June, the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office confirmed the grim truth. Shade's dismembered body had been scattered across parks, lakes, and neighborhoods. A deliberate attempt not just to kill, but to destroy her. Still, her memory wouldn't be erased, and the courtroom would soon become the stage for a brutal reckoning. The trial of Maxwell Anderson began on Tuesday, May 27, 2025. It would last 9 days. The charges were grave: first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse; arson of property other than a building; hiding a corpse. He sat expressionless, defended by attorney Anthony Cotton. The state was represented by Assistant District Attorney Ian Vance Karen. Judge Laura Crivello presided. The jury was shown evidence that stripped away all doubt. Friends took the stand, people who had known Shade since childhood. Some had texted her the night she vanished. None ever got a reply. Among the evidence shown was a haunting photograph, the last known picture of Shade Robinson, taken on the day she went missing. She wore ripped jeans, a black puffer jacket, and white shoes. That exact outfit was later recovered, burned in the trunk of her scorched Honda Civic. Then came the detectives. Detective Joanne Donner from the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office testified about the moment she helped recover Shade's severed leg. She said it looked like a sharp tool had been used to saw it off, leaving behind a distinctive zigzag pattern. It wasn't improvised. It was methodical, planned. On day 2, emotional testimony continued. Shade's former leasing agent was called to the stand. She broke down. Surveillance footage was shown, a chilling clip of Shade leaving her Brewers Hill apartment on April 1st, 2024. She would never return. By April 2nd, her leg had washed ashore. The prosecution revealed body cam footage from that day in Warnament Park: rain, mud, and then the discovery. Also shown was surveillance footage of a silhouette, a human figure, pacing a bluff above Lake Michigan between 3 a.m. and 4:15 a.m. The image was grainy, unclear. You couldn't see a face. You couldn't see hands. But the timing, the location, it was all pointing in one direction. Detective Alexis Crook took the stand. She opened bag after evidence bag in front of the jury. Inside were the remnants of Shade's final outfit: her ripped jeans turned inside out, a black jacket, burned underwear, and charred shoes. The jury leaned in. In cross-examination, the defense seized on one detail. There was no physical evidence proving Maxwell had ever been inside Shade's car. His fingerprints weren't there. No DNA. No obvious identifiers. Still, the prosecution pushed back. New footage showed a man believed to be Anderson walking away from the burning Honda Civic near 30th and Lisbon on April 2nd. Witnesses claimed they saw him throw a lit object, likely a lighter, into the vehicle. Surveillance also showed him driving Shade's car hours earlier near a playground, close to where more of her remains would be discovered. Investigators also noted a strange detail. The driver's seat was pushed far back, too far for someone of Shade's height. They conducted experiments comparing the seat's position with the height of two deputies, one matching Maxwell's height, the other Shade's. The implication was chilling. Shade hadn't driven that car. He had. Then came a curveball. The defense introduced the idea of drugs found in Shade's apartment. They argued it could point to another narrative, a lifestyle, a reason. But here's the truth. No drugs were found in Shade's system. And those items never even sent to the lab for testing. The prosecution objected. Rightly so. Shade's family attorney, Verona Swanigan, said it plainly. This is not a case about drugs. The police testified the drugs were irrelevant. The murder had nothing to do with drugs. To bring up untested evidence that may not even be real drugs? It's prejudicial. It's cruel. It's a red herring. But the judge sided with the defense. And then came the most heartbreaking moment of the trial so far. Graphic photos of Shade's torso and arm were shown to the court. The images were brutal. Too much. Shade's mother, who had sat quietly for most of the trial, couldn't stay silent. She stood, walked toward Anderson, and through her grief and fury, she shouted words that shook the courtroom. "You're a devil! Burn in hell!" We can't repeat everything she said, but her pain was raw, unfiltered, real. This isn't just a courtroom drama. This is the story of a young woman who trusted someone and was hunted instead. Shade didn't deserve this. No one does. But her voice won't be silenced. And through this trial, through this truth, she will be remembered. The truth wasn't just hidden in the shadows. It had been burned, buried, and scattered. Days after Shade Robinson vanished, Milwaukee detectives were already neck-deep in what felt like a nightmare unraveling in slow motion. Then came the break. Her car, a Honda Civic, was discovered engulfed in flames near 30th and Lisbon. And it wasn't just the car that was destroyed. It was the final piece of her freedom. The final trace of a girl who had trusted the wrong man. Investigators wasted no time. In court, one detective took the stand, calmly walking the jury through what would become a mosaic of haunting surveillance footage. The video showed a man, believed to be Maxwell Anderson, boarding a bus at 35th and Lisbon on the morning of April 2nd, only 30 minutes after two women near the fire had screamed for someone to call 911. One of the women remembered clearly. He did that. Call the fire department. Call the ambulance. They had seen someone walking away from the burning vehicle, someone the prosecution argued was Maxwell himself. That figure disappeared toward a nearby playground, a quiet space near the railroad tracks. But what they'd find next would silence the courtroom. A few days later, an unthinkable discovery was made just east of that playground, tucked in a wooded area often used for illegal dumping. Human remains, a foot, a chunk of flesh, bones. And the worst part, it wasn't even the police who made the first discovery. It was Shade's own family. After seeing news reports and witnessing police activity at the site, her relatives went to the area themselves, desperate for answers, hoping for anything but that. There, they found something that twisted their hope into horror. A blanket that belonged to Shade. The next day, more remains were uncovered. This time, cleaner cuts of body parts severed at the ankle with unnatural precision. The reality hit hard. Someone hadn't just killed Shade. Someone had taken her apart. The defense tried to poke holes, pointing out that this was a public space. Anyone could have accessed the area between police searches. They even noted that the blanket had been overlooked initially. But the prosecution was just getting started. Detectives recovered camera footage from multiple neighborhoods, including the one where Shade's car was torched. Her vehicle had been seen circling around shortly before 5 a.m., then pulling into an alley 2 hours later, right before flames consumed everything she had. Court adjourned for the weekend, only to return with a witness who had once lived just feet away from evil. Pete Warrington, Maxwell's tenant, had been living in the lower unit of the red brick duplex for 2 years. He'd known Maxwell since childhood, but what he shared painted a picture of someone living on the edge of disorder. He described his landlord as erratic. The yard was full of half-dug holes, unfinished projects, tools scattered like forgotten thoughts. The basement was Maxwell's domain, buzzing with noise at all hours. Pete remembered the loud guests, the late-night parties, the alcohol. 2, sometimes 3 times a month, he couldn't sleep until 3 a.m. because of the chaos above his head. But when asked if he'd heard anything unusual, a scream, a fight, anything on the night Shade was believed to have died, Pete said, "Nothing. It was that quiet," he repeated. "I didn't even know he was there." But the silence in that house would soon scream louder than anything Pete had heard. April 4th, 2024. Detectives had spotted Maxwell's car. They began tailing it, and what happened next wasn't random. It was calculated. A ruse. They wanted to stop him before he got home, before he could destroy more evidence. And so they pulled him over. Maxwell sat behind the wheel, visibly shaking. Later that same day, a human leg washed up near Lake Warmont Park. The medical examiner noted the wounds around the amputation were irregular, not clean, not professional. Knife cuts, stab wounds. She had caffeine in her system, no alcohol, no drugs, and no answers as to how she died. But there was no doubt Shade Robinson had been murdered, and whoever did it tried to erase her from the world piece by piece. The following court sessions were focused on Maxwell's home, a house now treated like a crime scene. Detectives searched it multiple times. They were looking for anything that could tie him directly to the murder. They didn't find everything, not all of the clothes he was seen wearing in surveillance footage, especially not after he burned Shade's car. But what they did find? Dozens of knives. 51, just in the kitchen. Others in different rooms, some hidden, some in plain sight. His camouflage backpack, missing. His shoes, gone. The sweatshirt he was seen wearing, found later tossed in a garbage can. Then came the bombshell. DNA. Some of Shade's DNA was found on 2 separate jackets belonging to Maxwell, including the very sweatshirt prosecutors say he wore when he set her car on fire. One of the DNA swabs came from the zipper pull, a single-source female profile, Shade's profile. Even the defense couldn't ignore it, but they tried to cast doubt. We don't know how it got there. We don't know when it got there. But DNA is DNA. Prosecutors also used surveillance footage, phone records, and the Life 360 app to map out Shade's final movements. Video showed her car passing by her own apartment building just after 1 a.m. on April 2nd after leaving Maxwell's home. He had driven her vehicle. She never made it back. Defense attorneys pushed back. They questioned how Maxwell could have known where she lived. They argued there was no hard proof he'd ever been to her apartment. But the lead detective said what everyone in the courtroom was already thinking. We'll never know, because one of the people who could answer those questions is no longer with us. On day 8 of the trial, the courtroom fell quiet as closing statements were read. The prosecution laid out the puzzle piece by piece, asking the jury to consider the evidence not in isolation, but as a whole. They didn't have to guess. They only had to see what was already there. The defense argued the state had failed to meet the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, but the facts of the fire, the body parts, the missing items, the knives, the DNA told a chillingly clear story. As of June 6, 2025, the day of this recording, the jury has heard it all. Now the fate of Maxwell Anderson and justice for Shade Robinson lies in their hands. Guilty on all counts. That was the word that echoed through the courtroom and through the hearts of everyone who had waited, prayed, and cried for justice. It took the jury only 45 minutes to reach their decision. Less than an hour to decide the fate of a man who had stolen a life so full of light, so rich with promise. Maxwell Anderson was found guilty on every charge connected to the death of Shade Carleena Robinson. He now awaits sentencing, scheduled for August 15th, 2025, where he faces a minimum of 20 years in prison. But for Shade's family, no amount of time behind bars could ever balance the scales. You can sentence a man, but you can't sentence pain. And grief doesn't end with a verdict. Outside the courtroom, Shade's mother, Sheena Scarrow, stood before reporters, her voice steady, but her heart visibly broken. "She'll always be remembered as an angel," she said. "A light worker, someone who touched so many souls in this city and this world. She is our hero." There was no script in Sheena's voice, only raw, unfiltered love. She walked in her own light. She solved her own case. "That's how I raise my children. We don't give up. We're fighters. I demanded justice. And now I stand tall." "Affirmative." She paused, then added with trembling pride, "Shade will walk with me every day. She's right beside me." And she asked one thing of the public, something heartbreakingly simple. Live like Shade did, with purpose, with kindness, with strength. That's how you keep her memory alive. Just weeks after Shade's life was taken, her name was spoken aloud at Milwaukee Area Technical College's commencement ceremony. But instead of walking across the stage, there was an empty seat left for her. Her family accepted her posthumous degree in criminal justice, a degree she had earned through sweat and grit, through long nights and double shifts. She had fought so hard to get there, and though she didn't get to wear the cap and gown, her name still rang out through that auditorium and through the hearts of everyone who knew what had been lost. Across Milwaukee, the city mourned. Some did it quietly and lighting candles at home. Others made their grief public, building makeshift memorials. One outside Pizza Shuttle, where Shade had worked and laughed and lived. Another outside the house where her killer once lived, a dark place turned into a shrine of pink. Pink was her favorite color. People brought pink balloons, pink flowers, pink posters with her name written in bold, defiant letters. Some left notes. Some left stuffed animals and drawings. Her name stretched across the lawn, not to mark where he had lived, but to remind the world where she should still be living. Even Maxwell Anderson's father came forward, offering public condolences to the Robinson family. A gesture, however small, in the face of something unimaginably large. In September 2024, a mural of Shade was painted on the side of Pizza Shuttle. Bright, bold, beautiful, just like her. A permanent image brushed onto brick so that Shade would never fade from memory. But still, something was missing. Because even in death, her family had nowhere to go. There was no gravesite, no full set of remains, just scattered pieces of a girl who once dreamed of the sky. Shade's mother made a heartbreaking plea. She asked officials in Milwaukee County to sponsor a public memorial in her daughter's name, not just for the family, but for the city, a place to visit, a place to say her name out loud, a place to mourn. The proposed memorial, to be placed in Warrimont Park, the very same park where part of Shade had been found, would cost $7,000. But less than a week before the trial began, the resolution was pulled. Why? Hate. Supervisor Juan Miguel Martinez, who had been working closely with the Robinson family, withdrew the proposal after receiving an overwhelming flood of racist, violent, and threatening emails. The messages were so extreme that other county supervisors began asking for their names to be removed from the document. And so without ceremony, the resolution died. No vote, no debate, just silence. But the people of Milwaukee, they weren't done fighting. When news of the memorial's withdrawal hit the public, an outpouring of support swept across the city. One of the first to step up was Omar Sheikh, co-owner of Carnivore Steakhouse in the 3rd Street Market Hall. He started with a small idea, a private dinner to raise the money. But the response? It was explosive. Messages came pouring in from people all over, strangers, friends, even businesses wanting to help. So Omar changed the plan. He turned it into a public fundraising event held on February 16, 2025, inside 3rd Street Market Hall. It was more than a dinner, it was a declaration. A community standing up for a young woman taken too soon. The funds from the event were split between two powerful causes: Shade's Memorial, and something new. Shade's Voice Foundation. Launched by Sheena and her supporters, Shade's Voice is more than just a nonprofit. It's a living, breathing legacy, a way to keep fighting in her name for every person who's been ignored, dismissed, or forgotten. According to the Foundation's GoFundMe page, its mission is to speak up for the underserved, Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are missing, murdered, and too often mistreated or neglected by the media and law enforcement. These are the cases that get lost in the noise. These are the stories that need to be heard. As of the time of this recording, the GoFundMe is still active. If you feel moved, if you feel angry, if you feel anything, consider helping. Because Sheena made a decision. Her daughter's voice wouldn't be buried with her body. It would rise, it would speak, it would fight. The Foundation plans to offer self-defense training, community resources, advocacy programs, and spaces for healing, because sometimes justice is bigger than a courtroom. Sometimes it's about turning tragedy into change. Shade Robinson's story didn't end the night she was taken. It continues in every mural, every balloon, every speech, every dollar raised, and in the hearts of people like you who refuse to let her name be forgotten. Sometimes, the scariest stories aren't whispered in the dark. They're lived in broad daylight. Shade Carleena Robinson was not a statistic. She was not a news headline or a cautionary tale. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a girl who danced, who dreamed, who named her car after a dog she loved. She had plans, she had purpose, and above all, she had light. And that light was stolen. But in the face of that darkness, something extraordinary happened. A city rose, a mother refused silence, a name became a movement, and Shade's voice, though silenced by violence, now echoes louder than ever. We talk a lot about justice in true crime stories, but what does justice really look like when there's no grave to visit? No goodbye? When closure is just a word and not a feeling? It's a haunting question and one we ask you to sit with. Because the truth is, Shade's story doesn't end here. It lives on in every person who chooses to say her name, in every mural painted, every dollar donated, every young woman who feels seen because of her. So now we ask you, the True Crimes Ratels community, what does it mean to seek justice when pieces of a person are still missing? When even memorials are met with hate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This isn't just a conversation, it's how we remember. And if this story moved you, share it, not for the views, but because someone, somewhere, might see it and think twice, might choose a different path, might realize that the people they harm are people like Shade. Here at True Crimes Ratels, we don't just retell tragedy, we carry it. We preserve the stories of those who can no longer speak for themselves, and we do it together. That's what it means to be a Ratel, unafraid, unwavering, relentless in truth. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on so you never miss a story. New episodes drop every week, and each one brings us closer to understanding the darkness and maybe how to keep the light alive. Like this video if Shade's story touched you. Leave a comment, let your voice join hers. And share this with someone, anyone, because the more people who know her name, the harder it is for it to be erased. This is True Crimes Ratels. And this was the story of a girl who solved her own case. A girl whose voice will never be silenced.